seeing both parents at once or both grandparents at once. And I know that for many people this will be a long-awaited and joyful moment.
It also means more shops can open and schools will be allowed to start getting more pupils back in classrooms. From tomorrow, people in Scotland can meet one other household as long as it's outdoors. The First Minister there stipulated the group must not exceed 8. The Department of Health's confirmed 37,837 people have died in UK hospitals, care homes and the wider community after testing positive. As of yesterday, the figure was up by another 377. The Prime Minister's refused to allow questions about Dominic Cummings' conduct to be directed at his chief science and medical advisers. Durham Police said earlier it's not taking any action against his senior aide, although it believes he did break lockdown rules, making a trip to a local beauty spot on Easter Sunday. Boris Johnson insists the issue's now closed, but the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he should have acted differently.
The Prime Minister has exposed himself as pretty weak over the last 6 days. A strong Prime Minister would have said to Dominic Cummings, look, you're going to have to go because other people are less likely now to obey the rules because you haven't really done it yourself.
In the last hour at the Downing Street Daily Briefing, Professor Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance were asked if the actions of Mr Cummings undermined their expert advice. The Prime Minister intervened.
I know that you've asked Chris and Patrick, but I'm going to interpose myself, if I may, and protect them from what I think would be an unfair and unnecessary attempt to ask a political question. It's very, very important that our medical officers and scientific advisors do not get dragged into what I think most people will recognise is fundamentally a political argument.
Premier League matches will be back next month from the 17th of June. In 20 days, Arsenal will face Manchester City and Aston Villa play Sheffield United. Players have already been back in training with extra testing for coronavirus. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 74 at 62.18. The pound's buying $1.23 and €1.11. Weather tonight, clear skies mostly, a bit breezier further west, just low cloud and mist for the north and east, and parts of northern Scotland a low of 5 Celsius. Tomorrow, warm and sunny again across the UK, some cloud to start, the odd shower just for Scotland and a high of 26 degrees. From Global's newsroom, you're up to date.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, today was day one of the NHS Test and Trace programme, something that was introduced early. It was not supposed to be rolled out until Monday, the 1st of June. It came in yesterday, it was announced. Today was day one of it. Of course, you know the reason why. The reason why is the attempt to move us on from the row which since the last weekend has dominated everything. And I said last night, and I mean it, that the government getting testing and tracing right is vital. It's vital for the country so that we can actually get the economy moving again with confidence, that we can stop a second wave from engulfing us. It's also become absolutely crucial for the survival of this government in terms of not numbers in Parliament, they've got those, but in terms of public confidence and support. They need to get this right. And I did think to myself yesterday, how very strange that you launch a massive new change in the country, but you do it without radio adverts, you do it without TV adverts, you do it without any newspaper adverts. The whole thing was rushed through. And the reason it was rushed through is they knew they had a problem. After the show last night, I went for a walk. And about half an hour into it, I passed a local cricket ground. There were about 25 people lying around on the grass, kids kicking a ball around, wine being drunk, picnic being partaken of. And I walked up and they sort of knew who I was. And I sort of jokingly said, so have you given up on social distancing? Oh, since that bloke went up north, if it's one rule for them and one rule for us, no, the hell with it. We don't care anymore. That's the problem the government has got. It's been losing authority pretty quickly. That's why it needs to move on to test and trace. And yet, we've just witnessed a really, I think, pretty extraordinary 5 p.m. Downing Street press conference. Boris Johnson himself, unusually in the chair, watching it all. For us at LBC was our Westminster correspondent, Ben Kentish. Ben, just explain to listeners how extraordinary that conference was.
Nigel, I've never seen anything like it in the whole time that I've been covering politics. Actually, Boris Johnson announced some pretty big changes to the lockdown.
Yes.
But what he did elsewhere, it means that no one wants to talk about that because it was the other events in the press conference that were far more dramatic and unusual. He explicitly stepped in twice to forbid, really, either of the scientific advisors, the two most senior, the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, the Chief Scientific Advisor, Patrick Vallance, from answering questions about Dominic Cummings. He said it would be unfair to drag them into a political row and stop them answering questions. That was the first astonishing thing.
And just on that, briefly, Ben, of course, this is the first time we've seen Vallance and Whitty for a long while, isn't it?
It's the first time journalists have had the opportunity, Nigel, to question them directly about Dominic Cummings. They were due to give the press conference with Boris Johnson on Sunday. They were in number 10 at the time, but they were dropped, I suspect, for this reason, because either they don't want to comment or number 10 doesn't want them to, or both.
And also, Ben, during the whole crisis, they're the ones that have been the most frank with journalists.
They have. They've been very, very open, both of them. I did think it was quite astonishing when Chris Whitty did get asked very directly about Dominic Cummings. He completely backed up the Prime Minister and said he didn't want to get drawn into politics. But the question wasn't about politics. The question was, is very specific, very direct. Is it safe for people to drive 60 miles in order to test their eyesight? That is a question that is perfectly relevant in, I think many people will feel, for the Chief Medical Officer of England. And twice he refused to answer it. And Nigel, there was one further thing that I couldn't quite believe, I must say, because in response to a totally unrelated question, it was a question from The Sun, which was, if we can now go and have a barbecue in someone's garden, can we stay over if we set up a tent? Boris Johnson, this is a question totally unrelated to Dominic Cummings, replied saying this: we are not saying that people should be free to travel across the country to stay in other people's houses.
No.
That was the response from the Prime Minister.
Gosh. So really, a quite extraordinary attempt to close down, effectively, the press conference. So we can, look, there are no rules. Everyone's ignoring what the government's saying now anyway. I've seen that myself. But from Monday, groups of up to 6, are allowed to meet and socialise.
That's right, and this is a big step. Is a big step that would normally be front page news because, of course, means people better see their parents, their children, their grandchildren, and yet that's what I almost found so surprising. Boris Johnson's refusal to let Whitty and Vallance answer almost means that is likely to dominate after that press conference. But it is a very significant step, Nigel. Of course, it will affect a lot of people's lives because now we can start to see friends in groups again. We can start to see relatives in groups again. All the caveats, of course. It has to be outdoors. We have to be 2 meters apart, and it's only groups of 6. But it is no doubt a major step.
It's a big step
major
forward.
Progress, and it's bizarre that it's going to be overshadowed.
Look, we can see the front pages tomorrow already, I think.
Absolutely.
And Ben, day one of NHS Test and Trace. Was there much of that discussed today?
There was not tons at the press conference. There's a bit of confusion, Nigel, because initially there were some teething problems, as perhaps you might expect. They've got this system up and running incredibly quickly, really, possibly too early, according to some of the experts. But then other experts say it needed to be in place a long time ago, so they're sort of caught in a bind. There were some teething problems, but then we had the slightly surprising a revelation that Dido Harding, who we talked about last night, who's in charge of this, setting up this system, had told MPs that it wouldn't be fully functioning until the end of June. Now, that's surprising for two reasons. Firstly, because the government had talked about it being world-beating pretty much from the start of it being up and running. But also, slightly concerningly, because the scientific advisors have been very, very clear in public that there needs to be what they call a fully functioning track and trace system before any lockdown measures can be eased. Now, Boris Johnson announced quite a significant easing that will take place on Monday, including 3 years of primary school children going back, more people seeing their families, shops starting to reopen. And if all that happens while the test and trace system is still not fully functioning, then there will be concerns about the impact that the relaxation will have on the potential for a second peak.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Ben, thank you very much for that incredibly frank assessment of what you just witnessed at that really extraordinary Downing Street press conference. We should be talking we should be talking about NHS testing and tracing. It is the single most important thing in terms of how we emerge from this crisis and how we learn to live with the virus. Forget about miracle cures. Forget about vaccines being in place in the next fortnight, us all being inoculated by Christmas. It isn't going to happen. We're going to have to adapt our lives in some way, but at the same time, get our economy moving again. And that is why this system, this scheme, one that already we've seen work in South Korea, work remarkably well in Germany at the early stages of this crisis. So it is really, really important. Just as recently as the 20th of May, when Boris Johnson was talking about testing and tracing, this is what he said.
We will have a test, track and trace operation that will be world-beating, and yes, it will be in place. It will be in place by June the 1st. And just to repeat the figures, since he's invited me to do so, there will be 25,000 trackers. They will be able to cope with 10,000 new cases a day. And that's very, very important, because currently new cases are running at about 2,500 a day. They'll be able to trace the contacts of those new cases and to stop the disease spreading.
A world-beating system in place by the 1st of June. Do you think Boris Johnson by Monday, as Prime Minister, will meet this objective? Well, if they're going to have to move pretty damn quickly. Number one, because Baroness Dido Harding, who's been brought in to oversee this, has said the local element will not fully be in place until the end of June, because the NHS app that was meant to go with it isn't ready yet. And because even people who are testing positive for coronavirus are reluctant to hand over the names and phone numbers of people they have come into contact with. And many of those who were paid £75 today to work as part of the tracing team say they've sat around all day without any work to do. You see, this is the pattern all the way through this crisis. The government says we'll do X. We get to that point and they fail, but they say it doesn't matter because there's an even bigger horizon just around the corner. Is this going to be a world-beating system, as promised just a week and a half ago? I would say not a cat's chance in hell. This is a government that overpromises and underdelivers. That's my view. Tell me what you think on 0345 6060 973. Let's get some public view on what's going on here. Let's go to Nick in Southampton, a new caller. Nick, good evening.
Hello there. I understand the words civil duty. We as citizens have a duty to support one another in times of national crisis,
yes,
which this is.
Yes.
Boris Johnson, who I thought was going to look after our country and its citizens, doesn't seem to have civic duty. He's been asked to provide the evidence by the Parliamentary Committee yesterday, which helped him to make the decision to support Cummings. I wish I didn't have to mention Cummings again, but anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, we'd love it to be we'd love it, Nick, to be a Cummings-free zone, but it's a bit difficult, really, isn't it?
Well, it is, but he won't provide the evidence. He glosses over it. He says, move on. Well, yes, I will, but I no longer have faith in him or his apparent sycophantic cabinet. I've quite a few reasons not to comply, but I have a civic duty to comply for the sake of the UK, and I will. Well, why can't he? Why can't he actually make a decision on Cummings? It may restore some credibility. It's a very divisive thing, this Cummings, and I wish it would go away.
Well, he does too. He does too. He does too, but it won't. I mean, Nick,
true leadership.
Can I ask you, Nick?
From Boris. Yeah.
Can I ask you, Nick? Did you vote for Boris as Prime Minister?
Well, no, I didn't have a vote. I thought he might be good fun, actually. He was certainly a better alternative to the other person, Corbyn.
Yeah.
I'd rather have had Boris in charge. He always had a good team about him when he was with I called it the GLC. It wasn't the GLC, was it? But he was
London Mayor. He was London Mayor. The London Assembly was what he was accountable to. Yeah. OK, Nick, thank you. Nigel, some people will now have the attitude of those you saw in the park yesterday. My only sympathy would be the innocent people who it may affect. Brian in Hornchurch, I understand. I'm not encouraging this behaviour. What I'm saying is I've seen with my own eyes in the course of the last week, respect, the authority of government is diminishing, and I'm suggesting it's happening pretty damn quickly. It's 6:15. Time for the news headlines with Bill Overton.
The Prime Minister says 5 coronavirus tests have been met, so there'll be further lockdown measures in England lifted from Monday. People in Scotland are also going to be able to meet friends and family from different households as of tomorrow. Another 377 UK deaths from COVID-19 have been reported across all settings. The weather tonight, mostly clear skies, cloud and mist patches forecast further north and east with a low of 5 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Anne-Marie Walsh. The M25 is queuing anti-clockwise from Junction 3 at the Swanley interchange towards the Dartford Tunnel, where the right-hand tunnel remains closed following an accident. The A2 remains closed eastbound between Dartford Heath and the Darrenth interchange for recovery work following an accident this morning. It's queuing on surrounding routes as traffic diverts. The North Circular in Palmer's Green is partially blocked at the Clockhouse interchange because of an accident. And on the trains, the London Overground, there's no service from Wilson Junction to Richmond and Clapham Junction.
This is LBC.
I've used my ample time indoors to hunt down my odd socks. I found one down the sofa, one in the bread bin, and one in a serious relationship with my cat. But there are better ways to spend your time. That's why Money Supermarket is helping you find cheaper insurance, better interest rates, and easier ways to manage your bills. You can find many more small steps towards money care at Money Supermarket.
This is LBC.
Working with government and National Rail, TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're in this together and you have a vital part to play. Continue working from home if you can. Avoid public transport to allow those that must use it to do so safely. Walk or cycle to work if you can. We're adding cycleways and widening pavements to help. If you must travel, travel off-peak, especially in the mornings. For those who must use public transport, it is now very different. Follow national social distancing measures of 2 metres wherever possible. Wear a face covering over your nose and mouth and wash your hands before and after travel. Our services are regularly cleaned with hospital-grade antiviral disinfectant for everyone's safety, and we're providing hand sanitizer across the public transport network to help reduce the spread of the virus. Thank you for your help. Search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At NatWest, we're putting our money where your business is. We've set aside £5 billion of working capital funding for our customers and have already lent over $3 billion to businesses like yours. So if you bank with NatWest and COVID-19 has affected your business, remember, every one of us is here to support you. Search NatWest Business Coronavirus.
Figures for RBS Group. Security may be required. Over 18s only, subject to status, business use only.
We're all juggling a lot at the moment. Take me. I'd normally be making a documentary right now, but at home, I've had to become my parents' questionable IT consultant, a glitchy virtual colleague and a distinctly average quiz show host. Which is why BT assembled some of the nation's favourite faces for a series of tech how-tos on homeschooling, digital well-being, working from home, online safety, video calling and more. To watch these guides, search BT Tech Tips. BT, Beyond Limits.
My name is Donya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
So from Monday up to 6 of us can meet and socialise. And Hannah in Kent quite rightly says, why announce on a Thursday before a sunny weekend that you can do something from Monday? Either announce it on Monday or simply say that for now you can't do it. Doesn't help with any of the clarity of these so-called rules. Hannah, people are doing it already. Now this is interesting. Kathy in Southampton is a regular messenger to us, regularly sends in texts to us and is very much a sort of Brexiteer Conservative supporter. Yet she says this, really interesting. I don't trust Boris. I like Starmer. What? I'm not a Labour supporter, but I think the Labour leader would do a better job than Boris. That is really, really interesting. On Twitter, and bear in mind that what we saw at that press conference was Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty silenced. They weren't allowed to comment, not just on the Cummings case per se, but whether it was having an impact on behaviour and therefore the health of the country. And on Twitter, Jan says, I absolutely want to hear what the scientific and medical advisors have to say. I no longer trust what the PM and government ministers have to say, except where the science/medical opinions back it up. I want to be able to follow the experts' recommendations. The new slogan, let's move on, is not working. He should fire the person who fed it to him, Terry in Manchester. I think we can guess where it came from. We've had a promise from the Prime Minister, a promise that by Monday we will have in place a world-beating testing and tracing system. Are you confident that he will deliver? Let's go to Alan in Rayleigh in Essex, a new caller. Welcome, Alan.
Hi, Nigel. Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Not a bit.
The subject of whether we'll have a world-beating track and trace and test system, it's not even up for debate. It's going to be League Two at best, not Premier League or even Championship.
So why does he say it, Alan? Why does he say things like this?
Well, I don't know. There was an excellent there was a documentary on Channel 4 a week or so ago that showed how they'd tackled it, and it was with surgical precision. Mm-hmm. They used people's GPS on their phones. Yep. They used the tapping of their bank cards to pay for things.
Yes,
and they'd send people a message, and they would say, and it was very.
And where was it done, Alan? Where was it done?
This was in South Korea.
Yeah, okay.
This was in,
yeah.
So
yeah.
If you went into if you Nigel had gone into a restaurant in Seoul to have a bit of lunch between 2 and 3 on a Tuesday afternoon, they would then send you a message to say there was a person in that restaurant at that time who is now tested positive. We suggest you go to your nearest test centre, and they know where you are because of your phone. It's all done by text message. They don't say it's you, Nigel, or me, Alan. It was your phone was next to someone else's phone in a restaurant where the air conditioning is spreading around the germ. So they said, go to this place to get tested, and maybe take a few days off. It was all very. It was very, very clear, and they
So Alan, it can be done. Alan, it can be done, but it's a very Big Brother state, isn't it?
It may be Big Brother, but because they tackled it early, it's a very clever way of doing it when you're in the beginning of something. We are now well into maybe hundreds of thousands of people that have or are carrying the virus. They're talking about 9 or 10,000 new cases per day carrying. You're now in a position where this action is actually kind of when you say the locking the stable door before the horse has bolted, the horse is in another field and he's being fed by another farmer.
Yeah.
We are so far away
from
this being an effective use.
Although, Alan, I mean, listen, I would agree with that analogy when it comes to quarantining. We should have done that a long, long time ago. But if we do have an efficient test and tracing system in place, if there's any prospect of a second wave, we could nip it in the bud with this. And it really is important, isn't it?
It is, and hopefully it does work. But to call it world beating without the use of an app or the movement data. For instance, if I tomorrow jump on a tube and I travel to work, and then on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday I do it next week, and then Thursday I feel a bit ill and I get I'm tested positive. Who's to say who I was with on that tube train or that bus journey? I know. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. I can't give that. The system they're using is that I give them the information of who I was in contact with, which, when I say the world-beating one, is using technology.
Yeah, I get it. No, Alan, I get the point. The South Korean system works. Ours relies on people giving information which may often be unreliable. Alan, thank you for coming on to LBC, making your point. Well, lots of very strong messages coming through here. Look, I'm getting a lot of negativity from you tonight. Very few of you, I'm one of them too, think we'll have a world-beating system on test and trace by Monday. Many are scratching their heads as to why they keep promising us the moon and not delivering. And the Dominic Cummings stuff and that press conference does not go away. On Twitter, I can't quite believe what I witnessed tonight over the refusal to let the scientists answer the Cummings questions, says Stella. The message is loud and clear. Wash your hands of Dominic Cummings. Boris was disgusting on Downing Street press conference. The way he treated everyone tonight was terrible. He thinks by letting 6 of us get together in our gardens, we will forget how he has treated the whole country when it comes to his advisor. I am finished with him. Somebody please come on and tell me that Boris is getting this right. We need to have both sides of the argument here on LBC. 0345 6060 973. Someone ring up and tell me Boris is getting it right and that we will have a world-beating system by Monday. It's important to hear both sides of an argument before you finally make up your mind. Let's go to Manchester and speak to Aitan. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel.
Good evening. So, this is a very, very important next step. Are they going to deliver a world-beating system?
Well, it's possible that they could, but the reason they won't is because it relies on the will of the people. It relies on the good old British common sense, which Man Hancock has alluded to before. And what we're seeing, I think everyone will know this now, is that people are becoming less intuitive on social distancing. People are coming closer and closer together. We were supposed to be 2 meters away. Now everyone's 1.5 meters away. And I think it's slowly getting closer. People are getting closer to people as the days go by. And that is a very clear indication that if we get told by someone in the NHS that we need to lock ourselves in our houses for 2 weeks, it just doesn't make any sense. Will people listen to the advice? Because even when we were in the midst of the lockdown a few weeks ago, there were still people going out and about, people driving, including Dominic Cummings, as we established. And so, it's very difficult to say when it relies on the good old British common sense.
Yeah, and of course, it also relies also in us respecting the government and respecting the rules, and that's the thing that's gone wrong this week, isn't it?
Well, look, I think as a society we've done very well considering we're not authoritarian. We don't live in the same sort of rule book as North Korea. The police do not have the same level of...
Or even South Korea.
But the thing is, even in European countries like Germany and Austria, you've got children wearing face masks who actually want to wear face masks.
Yes.
And here in the UK, children are afraid to wear face masks.
Aitan, a couple of weeks ago, we had an independent journalist from Greece on, talking about how it was that lockdown, social distancing, obeying the rules have been so successful that the death toll in Greece is really stunningly low. And one of the things that journalist said was that people obeyed the rules, did what they were told because they had great respect for the government. And I think at the beginning of this, most people, the vast, well in the 90s%, in the first few weeks of this, actually did comply with the rules in a remarkable way. And the worry is, now they won't. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Ewan from Inverness Shire says, I don't agree with much you have to say, Nigel. However, I can't disagree this evening. The government has shown itself to be contemptuous, arrogant and utterly inept. Paul in Coventry said, I was a devout Boris supporter. But a question tonight asked about whether a so-called scientist was comfortable with being asked questions about Mr. Cummings testing his eyesight and yet was not granted a reply. This will stay with me for a long time. I cannot say if I will ever vote Tory again. I'm 63 next week. I am so angry. And that's the problem. The problem is Monday is a big day. It's a big day. Car showrooms open, street markets open again. We're able to meet in larger groups of up to 6 or whatever it may be. A significant easing of lockdown is coming on Monday, allied to which is the key to our success for the future, which is a test and trace system that actually works and protects us against a catastrophic second outbreak of this virus, which if it comes back in the autumn in a serious way, I shudder to think what that would mean, not just for the health of the nation, but for the economy. And I'm particularly thinking about the self-employed and those running their small businesses. But when we're told it'll be a world-beating system by June the 1st, It looks pretty unlikely to me, and it's a government that very, very quickly needs to re-establish respect among the people. At the moment, I think it's losing it. In a minute, I'll talk to you about the statement from Durham Constabulary, but for now, it is 6:30, and that means it's time for the news with Bill Overton.
Boris Johnson's announced we can move out of total lockdown now the government's met its 5 coronavirus tests. From Monday in England, 6 people can meet outdoors, socially distanced, and shops and schools can start to reopen. Lockdown measures are also being lifted initially for Scotland from tomorrow, the first stage in a 4-step plan there. Small weddings could be allowed in Northern Ireland from June the 8th, and Wales will publish its update tomorrow. Durham Police has ruled Dominic Cummings' trip to Barnard Castle was a minor breach of lockdown rules. The government advisor claimed it was to check his eyesight was safe to drive. The force isn't taking retrospective action. The Premier League's to restart its interrupted season. Clubs have agreed to resume matches from the 17th of June. The weather tonight, clear skies mostly, feeling breezier further west. Some low cloud and mist patches much more north and east, with a low of 5 degrees.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Weekday mornings from 7.
Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who joins me now. The Prime Minister seemed to indicate yesterday that he's keen to look at this 2-metre rule. What can you tell us about that, Health Secretary?
Well, the scientists are going to look at it. If you are closer, then you are more likely to transmit. They reckon that at 1 metre for 1 minute, that has the same risk of transmission as being at 2 metres for 15 minutes.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Xero. Get your business digital ready with Xero accounting software.
LBC.
Your open plan office. It might be quiet now, but what about when it starts to get busy again? Social distancing could be tricky. So don't wait. Speak to the Glass Office people now about social distancing screens and glass partitions. They provide a safer, more hygienic way to share an open plan office. They're quick to install with minimal disruption, suitable for nearly every office environment, and now with finance options available. theglassofficepeople.co.uk, creating safer new spaces in places.
At NatWest, we're putting our money where your business is. We've set aside £5 billion of working capital funding for our customers and have already lent over $3 billion to businesses like yours. So if you bank with NatWest and COVID-19 has affected your business, remember, every one of us is here to support you. Search NatWest Business Coronavirus.
Figures for RBS Group. Security may be required. Over 18s only. Subject to status. Business use only.
At Direct Line, we usually take out radio ads to talk about ourselves. But this ad isn't about us. It's about Fair Share, a charity who are tirelessly working here in South East London and across the country, putting others first to deliver food to vulnerable people. That's why we're providing their volunteers with personal protective equipment so they can continue to help and stay safe. If you'd like to support Fair Share or find out more about their work, please visit their website, fairshare.org.uk. That's FARE share.org.uk. Fair Share, they're on it.
Working with government and National Rail, TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're in this together and you have a vital part to play. Continue working from home if you can. Avoid public transport to allow those that must use it to do so safely. Walk or cycle to work if you can. We're adding cycleways and widening pavements to help. If you must travel, travel off-peak, especially in the mornings. For those who must use public transport, it is now very different. Follow national social distancing measures of 2 metres wherever possible. Wear a face covering over your nose and mouth and wash your hands before and after travel. Our services are regularly cleaned with hospital-grade antiviral disinfectant for everyone's safety, and we're providing hand sanitizer across the public transport network to help reduce the spread of the virus. Thank you for your help. Search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag #FarageOnLBC.
A statement at lunchtime today from Durham Constabulary, in which they say, Durham Constabulary have examined the circumstances surrounding the journey to Barnard Castle, including ANPR, witness evidence and a review of Mr Cummings' press conference on 25th of May 2020, and have concluded that there might have been a minor breach of the regulations that would have warranted police intervention. Durham Constabulary view this as minor because there was no apparent breach of social distancing. Had a Durham Constabulary officer stopped Mr. Cummings driving on the way to Barnard Castle, the officer would have spoken to him and, having established the facts, lightly advised Mr. Cummings to turn around and return to the address in Durham. In response to that, the Prime Minister, who earlier this week said he thought Mr. Cummings had acted with integrity, the Prime Minister has said he believes Mr. Cummings behaved reasonably and legally given all the circumstances, and he regards the issue as closed. Do you remember that Little Britain sketch? We saw it time and again, where the political figure was caught in some ludicrous, embarrassing circumstance and then gave an explanation that was totally unbelievable and said, and that is the end of the matter. It was funny on Little Britain, but it isn't really quite so funny now. Do you know, even if the original journey up to Durham was questionable, and I'm quite certain that had he been stopped on the A1, they would have said return to London. But even if that was questionable, it was pretty obvious that the trip to Barnard Castle was a minor breach of the regulations. That was obvious to everybody. And yet they invent some cock and bull story that his eyesight wasn't very good, which is why he had to go on a 60-mile round trip. We get Michael Gove coming on LBC with Nick Ferrari saying that he too has driven at times when his eyesight's not good. I thought if you drove when you weren't fit to, that was perhaps leaving you liable to a fine of £1,000. They concocted a story that was unbelievable. They tried to defend it, and nearly all of this would have been avoided if Cummings had said, look, it was Easter Sunday, it was my wife's birthday, the weather was beautiful, my wife had had coronavirus, my young son had spent a night in hospital being ill, I'd been through 2 of the most miserable weeks health-wise of my life, we were getting a bit better, and yes, we did go out for a drive, we did walk through a wood, we did sit by a river, we didn't come into contact or breach social distancing rules. It was a minor breach and we're sorry. Do you know what? If he'd said that, I reckon most of us would have said, well, do you know what? We might have just pushed the rules a little bit here and there, and hey, where's the harm? In a situation like this, had we had a little bit of honesty in that press conference from Dominic Cummings, I think, some elements of the media, of course, would have bayed for blood, and we know that and we understand that, but I think public opinion would have said, yeah, all right, fair enough, let's just move on, let's just get on with it. As it is, about 40 Tory MPs have come out and said that he should resign. Many of the big guns, who privately may feel like that, have not said so publicly. One of the reasons is they want him around for the next month, particularly to make sure the next stage of Brexit actually does get done. But I think the behaviour around this has led to a loss of confidence in Boris Johnson as a leader that he's going to find very difficult to recover. Back to Test and Trace, and it really matters. I'm going to Newcastle to speak to Nkechi. Have I pronounced that rightly, a new caller?
Yes, that's fine. Nkechi is fine, yes.
Very good. Welcome. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Nigel. Nigel, can I just pick up from what you were talking about there, about Dominic Cummings? I'm a little bit, I think there's been a lot of focus on him, given everything we're going through in this country and all the challenges we are facing. I kind of find it a bit ridiculous that the media is taking weeks, days now, it's going to go into weeks, where they're still talking about Dominic Cummings. No, I don't think we should be. I actually don't think that scientific advisors should be put to answer questions about Dominic Cummings driving. No, I feel personally, is a political question. So they are there.
Well, hang on. You know, the specifics, that may be a political question, but the impact on public opinion and the need for them to emphasise, even if you don't think some people have behaved the way they should, you really ought to, that actually is not political. That's really quite important.
No, Nigel, yes. So when you when you talk about impact on public opinion, and you know, the public opinion is based on what you and the rest of the media keep sharing. So
No.
Nigel, I'm
the public make their own mind. You make your own mind up.
They make up their own mind. I make up my own mind. But
I know, most people do.
No, in the newspaper, people keep flogging, keep saying the same thing about Dominic Cummings, and it stirs up the hate. Okay, this man, I don't know him. He's not my story. I don't know anything about him, but I've watched him from the time about SAGE. There was something about the SAGE meeting. He was there in the scientific meeting. The media went on and on. They wanted to find out, was he there? Did he say anything? That was going to be another week of Dominic Cummings. I think we have more important things to talk about.
Okay, look. You are, of course, right. We have more important things to talk about. I don't disagree with that one little bit, which is why I'm trying to talk about the government's test and trace scheme. The problem is, and you're quite right, there are large elements of the media who've had it in for Cummings from the start. He's been very arrogant to them. He's a Brexit backer, which many of them are not. I get all of that. But what he's done, he's rather given them an open goal. And I would just repeat to you the point I made a moment ago. Had he been honest about the trip to Barnard Castle, we would not be in this mess.
I agree exactly, and I agree that obviously he was trying to save a job there, but definitely it's not like he's killed anyone at the moment. I'm sorry to use that word, because obviously he would have, if he had exposed someone, he would have passed infection. He hasn't. What has he really done that the nation has to come at a standstill for the past week?
It's the impression that people have got it, and look. I tell you what, the media can say what the hell they like. In the end, people make their own minds up, and I really do believe that. But it's the impression that it's one rule for those that make the rules and one rule for the rest of us. Anyway, I tell you what, let's move on from this. Tell me how you see the testing and tracing scheme and this huge promise that Boris has made that it's going to be a world-beating system by Monday, because it's not, is it?
I think in terms of the choice of word, we've all known Boris to always use the big words for things, whether it's met or it's not met. We know this is the way Boris likes to talk about things. I remember when he was going for Brexit, he was saying massive things, he was saying big things, So this is like Boris's style. But now, in terms of the tracing, testing and tracing, it's only just been launched today. Okay, it's supposed to be a nationwide thing. I know he has had a high expectation. He's got a high hope that it works. Okay, it's a computer-based thing. It relies on human beings doing it. There might be crash. There are times when companies have crashed. So we need to we need to just have a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I'm with you. There'll be teething problems. But why didn't he say to us on the 20th of May, we are introducing a system, there'll be a bit of trial and error, but we will in time develop a world-beating system. He told us it would happen on June the 1st. And I think we're getting a bit tired of over-promises and under-delivery.
I agree I understand where you're coming from, but then I think people just do not want anything. It looks like there's a set of people now who just do not want to see this government, make any progress. But people need to remember that because people like Dominic Cummings break the law doesn't mean you should break the law. We should be
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Responsible citizens, we should be safe, socially distancing. We shouldn't do things because someone like Dominic has done it. No, people that keep saying, "Oh, I'm not going to do this." I think that's actually wrong. People coming on national
I agree with you. No,
say things like that. No,
you make that point well and strongly, and I thank you. And backing it up is Leslie by text, who says, if people in the UK will use the Cummings story not to obey the rules and not to use the track and trace system, it shows how pathetic those people are. Yes, it does, and yet, I've lost confidence in Boris. He should have sacked Dominic Cummings. I'm also now in week 12 of shielding. I've given up the swimming that helps my cerebral palsy, and I'm deteriorating. I've lost trust in the government. Well, Chris, in Fareham, I don't know what to say other than, I hope you can get back to your swimming as soon as you possibly can. And there are people like that out there who have really done their bit. They've done what they're told, and they're pretty blooming angry. But a successful testing and tracing system will help people like Chris get back swimming. It really, really will. Let's go to Jean in Knapp Hill in Surrey, a new caller. Jean, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. How nice to speak to you. Somebody that talks a bit of sense.
Well, I do my best from time to time.
Nigel.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson has been telling lies left, right and centre.
That's a bit strong. That's a bit strong, Jean, isn't it?
Well, I think it's very strong, but it's the truth. He wrote me a letter and he said, you must stay at home. It didn't say, but my mate up the road's going to go up to Durham.
But he had childcare issues, Jean.
All this testing is going to... what about people that don't have smartphones. I have just a very ordinary telephone. How are they going to get hold of me?
No, well, I'm afraid that you will effectively.
They don't think anything through. Everything goes off at half-cock.
And Jean, you got the letter because you're described as being in a vulnerable category, yeah?
Yes. Well, I don't know. He just said it's the Prime Minister, and he signed it Boris Johnson.
Is that, Jean? I mean, it's a very rude question to ask a lady. Might that be because of your age? Is that the reason they wrote to you?
No, I don't think.
Is it because of a medical condition,
I think it's what we all got. Well, it cost a few million, didn't it?
Well, I think 1.5 million people got that letter, depending on medical conditions or age or whatever it was. Yeah, no, it wasn't. We didn't all get it, Jean. I can promise you.
Didn't you get it? Well, it does.
No, I didn't get it.
That is why I'm giving you one simple instruction. You must stay at home.
Okay, maybe that one.
Obviously, Dominic Cummings doesn't come into that category.
And is that how you feel, Jean? You feel it's one rule for them or one rule for the rest of us, do you?
Definitely. Oh, definitely.
You sound quite angry, Jean.
But against that, I think they're making I think how they can have 40,000 deaths on their conscience, I don't know. And as far as this going to be the world beating it, well, it's just ridiculous.
Jean, I think Boris has a lot of convincing to do with you in Knapp Hill in Surrey. Thank you for the call. This is the Nigel Farage Show. It is now 6:46. Time for the news headlines with Bill Overton.
Coronavirus lockdown restrictions being eased again in England. Groups of up to 6 will be allowed to meet outside from Monday. In Scotland, 2 households can do the same thing from tomorrow. Northern Ireland plans to relax more rules from June the 8th. The Premier League is going to restart matches from June the 17th. The weather, mostly clear skies tonight, breezier in the west, cloud and mist more north and east with a low of 5 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Anne-Marie Walsh. Long delays on the M25 anti-clockwise from Junction 3 at the Swanley interchange towards the Dartford Tunnel after an accident earlier, taking 50 minutes to get through the queues. The A2 remains closed eastbound between Dartford Heath and the Darrenth interchange for recovery work following an accident this morning. The North Circular in Palmer's Green, that's partially blocked at the Clockhouse interchange because of an accident there. And on the trains, there's no service on London Overground from Willesden Junction to Richmond and Clapham Junction because of a signalling problem.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
On the News Hour, lockdown easing, government finally speaks out on Hong Kong, the future of farming, and police clear Cummings, sort of.
Ian Dale on LBC.
Working with government and National Rail, TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're in this together and you have a vital part to play. Continue working from home if you can. Avoid public transport to allow those that must use it to do so safely. Walk or cycle to work if you can. We're adding cycleways and widening pavements to help. If you must travel, travel off-peak, especially in the mornings. For those who must use public transport, it is now very different. Follow national social distancing measures of 2 metres wherever possible. Wear a face covering over your nose and mouth and wash your hands before and after travel. Our services are regularly cleaned with hospital-grade antiviral disinfectant for everyone's safety, and we're providing hand sanitizer across the public transport network to help reduce the spread of the virus. Thank you for your help. Search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Your open plan office. It might be quiet now, but what about when it starts to get busy again? Social distancing could be tricky. So don't wait. Speak to the Glass Office people now about social distancing screens and glass partitions. They provide a safer, more hygienic way to share an open plan office. They're quick to install with minimal disruption, suitable for nearly every office environment, and now with finance options available. theglassofficepeople.co.uk. Creating safer new spaces in places.
Coronavirus UK, an LBC daily podcast with Nick Ferrari.
I'm bringing you a daily podcast with everything you need to know about the coronavirus outbreak.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
In challenging times, WG for Business is an award-winning single-source supplier of PPE, hygiene, office supplies and services. WG for Business has a 47-year track record to make your organisational requirements achievable today. For a no-obligation bespoke solution for your PPE, hygiene or office products, visit wgforbusiness.com or text AUDIT to 88802 now. That's audit to 88802.
We're all juggling a lot at the moment. Take me. I'd normally be making a documentary right now, but at home, I've had to become my parents' questionable IT consultant, a glitchy virtual colleague, and a distinctly average quiz show host. Which is why BT assembled some of the nation's favourite faces for a series of tech how-tos on homeschooling, digital well-being, working from home, online safety, video calling, and more. To watch these guides, search BT Tech Tips. BT, Beyond Limits.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Well, Jean's phone call before the break raised some very interesting points. Very good point, says Brad, made by Jean. What happens to those who do not use a smartphone with regards to testing and tracing? Brad, I think the answer to that is they simply don't count. Now, Jean talked about letters, and Peter from Solihull says, my whole family got the Boris letter setting out what you could do and couldn't do. The messaging from number 10 stated everyone would get it. There was a letter to all of us. There was, in addition, another letter that went to 1.5 million people who were deemed to be vulnerable. And I've been looking for people to try and counter the anti-Boris stuff we're hearing tonight. Ian from East Sussex says, it's about time the media moved on from Cummings. He and the rest of government have been working under immense pressure and making impossible decisions. We've had plenty of good news in this crisis. Joe from Pulborough says, I think Boris was spot on today. Very happy with how Boris is doing. Roll on Monday and the new easings. Also, let's get Brexit done. But Wayne from North Yorkshire says, I have voted Conservative all my life. However, with the blatant disregard by Boris of the public feelings of anger, he is treating us with contempt. This would have gone away days ago if there was some kind of reprimand for Cummings' blatant disregard for the rules that he devised upon, no matter how serious or not. This is just getting worse. Move on is a contemptuous joke. Well, the government have been trying now for 3 days to get this story to move on. It doesn't appear at the moment to be working. Let us go to Daniel in Washington, in Tyne Weir, a new caller. Daniel, good evening to you.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm all right. And Daniel, I want this testing and tracing regime to work, but it isn't going to be world beating by Monday, is it?
Well, and I appreciate that angle, and maybe a political, jargon for want of a better word. But the intention of the government, I believe, is that they will try their very utmost to get it working. But be it a world beater, okay, well, we're a bit behind with some of the testing that has gone worldwide. No, I think, and we've made mistakes. I would hold my hand up along with the government and say, we weren't prepared for this testing. But I personally, I'm a backer of Boris, and I'm a backer of Brexit, and I think the undercurrent is a Brexit. They're trying to stall it whichever way they can. I don't like the media, so I'm on Boris's side.
Daniel, of course they're trying to stall. Of course they're trying to stall Brexit. The trouble is, there's a chap from County Durham, not too far from you, who maybe has given them a bit of an excuse to bash them this week.
Yeah, and that's a bit unfortunate. But I'll listen to the news as everybody else does, and I don't go with the majority of people. He had as far as I'm concerned, I think he had a legitimate reason to come north. He wanted his child, a 4-year-old child, to be with family. Mm-hmm. I understand the arguments to the negative and say, well, if he can do it, why can't we? But I think the British public are beyond that. I go with the argument and say, well, if he can do it, I think the British public are above that. And let's face it, throughout the history of our political agenda, I lay claim to going back to about 1960, Harold Macmillan. My father brought me into the interest of politics when he came in one day and called Mr. Macmillan a B. I won't use the language on the phone. But and I thought, well, and I'd never heard my father speak like that, and I thought...
Well, politics does that, Daniel.
Yeah, well, it drew my attention to the fact, and from then on, I've had a very all right from a background. I'm not a member of anything or whatever. But I like politics, and I read between the lines. The political language.
And Daniel, are you a regular LBC listener?
I am. I'm a first-time caller, I'll agree. But, I wake to Steve Allen.
Yes.
Sorry for the competition.
No. I couldn't do what Steve Allen does in the mornings, Daniel, I tell you.
And Nick Ferrari.
Yep.
And then I'm afraid I have to admit I do other things. I come in the garden for the next chap. And the lady in the afternoon, but I'm not getting into that.
But the great thing is we can listen to who we want to listen to. Daniel, splendid to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Tony in Elmbridge is a new caller. Tony, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Are you confident? Are you confident we're going to get a system in place that will be, if not on Monday, but at some point before too long, world-beating?
I think at some point we will have a workable system which will drive down the virus, and I think that system will get better as the days move forward, and that's what we all want, right?
Yes, it is, Tony. Absolutely. I just can't get into my head why Hancock and Johnson keep making these ridiculous claims at press statements about world-beating this and world-beating that. Why not be a bit more realistic with us?
Well, because I think ultimately they need to try to instill some confidence in the public that they're driving this virus downwards, right? And you don't start by saying we're going to put together a pretty tin pot system, which may or may not work. What you do is you say we're going to put a system together, it's going to work, and it's going to drive the virus down.
But if time and again, Tony, you make promises that you don't deliver on, that makes the public lose confidence, not gain it.
No, but I think in this current crisis that we're in just now with Dominic Cummings, for instance, I have a bit of sympathy with him. I agree that there are many people out there who probably completely disagree with what he's done, but I do have some sympathy with him. But what I would say now is the press are dragging this issue down to the point that they are undermining the government in a time of, national crisis where we want people to be following rules. The press themselves are basically almost instigating the population to break those rules. And to be honest, even if you want to stick it to the man, as the press would like you to do, you need to think about the nurse and the doctor on the front line who might die as a result of you not following those rules.
Well, Tony, this is why, Tony, this is why the anger, and it's not just the press, but the anger in the public at what he's done, and some of the responses that I've seen are so dangerous. Tony, thank you. Very reasoned point of view. Let us take one last caller tonight. We're going to Sandra in Barnsley, a new caller. Sandra, good evening to you.
Oh, good evening, Nigel. This track and trace, I think it's different levels, same as how everybody's feeling about things. I think most people will do it, some people won't, and some people can't. So I don't think they're going to get...
That's very well put.
I don't think they're going to get the majority that they want. Some people don't want to be found.
Yeah, others haven't got a smartphone.
No.
Yeah, no. No, I think your summation of it, Sandra, actually is the best that I've heard anywhere. No, I really think it is. Yeah, I mean, of course, they've trialled this on the Isle of Wight, as you probably know, and not enough people have signed up to it on the Isle of Wight to make it work. But it is really important that it does work, isn't it?
It is, because I think, really, we haven't got a vaccination. We haven't got enough things in place. And I think it's still going to come down to herd immunity.
Do you?
I really do, yeah. Because if there isn't a vaccination, how are we going to beat it?
So we've got to... Well, Sandra, we've got to learn to live with it, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. It's like flus. It's down to the fittest survive, I'm afraid.
Well, I hope it's not as brutal as that. But Sandra... Blunt from Barnsley. People from Barnsley are always very straightforward in what they say. Sandra certainly was. Well, thank you, everybody. Let's see. I won't be back with you now until Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Maybe the rout will have died down and we'll be talking about more positive things. Let's hope so. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick. Now it's Ian Dale.
Thanks, Nigel. Coming up at 7 in the news hour, the Prime Minister has confirmed a slight easing of lockdown, but again the Dominic Cummings issue threatened to derail his news conference. He tried to talk about track and trace, but all the journalists wanted to ask about was Dominic Cummings. Football's coming back from 17th of June and will be shining a light on the farming sector as it struggles to see a post-coronavirus future. From 8, it's your chance to have your say, maybe about lockdown, track and trace, or you may want to comment about the latest developments in China and Hong Kong. After 9, top employment lawyer Daniel Barnett joins me to take your calls. I suspect there may be quite a few from employees of BA and EasyJet. Busy show tonight.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.